So anyway, Nate, tell us a little bit about what you do, where you are. Tell people who you are.
I'm in LA. I've been here for about more than a decade. And yeah, I'm an editor. I've loved Final Cut since version 6 when I first started like playing around. Um, it's kind of like one of the reasons I got into editing and moved to LA. Been working my butt off to try to do that. And so yeah, I did home movie The Princess Bride recently, which was Jason Reitman had this idea to sort of he's like, what's one of the best ways that the entertainers can entertain for a good cause? And so he came up with this idea to remake The Princess Bride, but the cast changes every single scene. And so the joy of it is you don't know who's going to play Fezzik next, or you don't know who's going to play Buttercup or Humperdinck, and that's part of the thing is that we were able to go out to these huge celebrities and sort of be like, just an hour, give us an hour of your time, maybe two, have your kid hold your phone, like do a scene work. And it was so much fucking fun because it was just sort of like this. The best things was when they take it very seriously. Yet Javier Bardem has like a feather duster, but he is taking the scene 100% seriously. And so it's this really fun mashup of sort of like a, sixth grade talent play, but with really like A-list talent. And I cut the whole thing on Final Cut 10 in my office here.
Let's talk more about that in a second. You're working in LA. I'm just gonna assume you don't normally cut all your jobs in Final Cut 10. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I'm mainly in Avid. I do love Avid, especially in sharing environments with other people. So I'm primarily cut features in
You're not
Avid.
allowed to like both.
That's
Well,
what
then
I've
I will
heard.
be. I don't know. I think it's okay. I think it's okay to like both. I actually adore both, and for different reasons. And I actually find it refreshing to switch back and forth between the two.
Do
Because to
you
me, the
find it?
default one
You say
are
it's refreshing. You say it's
yeah,
refreshing to switch back and forth.
yeah. Because to me,
Do you,
Avid is not to get any mixed up in any metaphors that aren't 100% accurate. It just feels um, there's a lot of legacy in Avid, and there's a lot of methodology to the psychology to me behind the user interface in terms of um, it kind of forces you to think about things in a different way. When 10 is just like you can do whatever you want in all different directions, up, down, left, right. It's like it's different. It's a different way of thinking.
and do you remap your keyboard to make them more similar?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. Scott Simmons is a good friend of mine. He's very much into remapping things, and he swaps back and forth between all four of them, Resolve and Premiere and Final Cut and Avid. But he says that his secret to it is remapping everything. How how is it that what do you gain by not remapping it?
I well for so one of my big breaks was honestly to when I started as an Avid technician at Bad Robot, and I would have to sit down and work on an Avid on any of the various 20, 30 machines that were up and running in the building. I never really got the opportunity to sit down and be like, hold on, let me load my user settings. Like I would sort of needed to sit down and like go. And so I kind of got used to just the way Avid works. And then with Final Cut, I sat down and I was enjoying learning all the different keystrokes for Final Cut because they were so different. And I didn't want to sit there and try to force Final Cut to be like Avid. And to me, they're not that different. The only thing that really screws me up is zooming in and out of the timeline because it's so close. It's brackets versus plus and minus, and so like that one always really like messes me up. I'll be like, oh shit, I get it. I'm doing the wrong thing.
Interesting. So what what was bad? I'm just you mentioned Bad Robot, and I went, oh, that's fun. What? How long did you work at Bad Robot?
I worked it there for a total about 6.5 years.
Wow.
So I
Now
started
was
there.
that always as a tech, or did you make the break into editing?
Uh, I edited a few different smaller things there. Like we did like short films, or JJ directed this one segment for the Oscars that I cut. I ended up being like an associate editor on 10 Gloverfield Lane, and But the main thing I end up, like my time at Bad Robot was DI. So I started there, then it was an assistant editor, ended up doing all the conform for Star Trek Into Darkness, 2D, 3D, IMAX 3D. It was huge.
Wow.
And then I was the DI supervisor for The Force Awakens. So we did all the DI coloring we did at Company 3, but onlining we did in-house. And it allowed us to have full control, sort of all the visual effects, assuring which version is which what, and then delivering reels at a time to Company 3 to color each shot.
All right,
I
so
always
you,
explain. Go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, so you've clearly worked both ways then. So you've done this, the like traditional thing. Like I did some of that working on Glee and all of that stuff. So I kind of know what that world is. How do you compare that towards, I mean, because I think we're pretty much stuck between two worlds if you're like a professional editor at this point, where you're gonna have to go and do it the very formal. It's not, I wouldn't call it a factory so much as you're part of a much larger organism that you have to fit into, versus like many of the Final Cut world, which is like, and you're the whole band. So how would you like explain the two worlds to people who've only been in one, and what the difference is in terms of how you have to like change your brain?
That's a great question. And what's fascinating is, to me, the spirit of Bad Robot and what we did there, especially at that time, was very much trying to be something new and be more independent. That's why we did the DI in-house. And so we were kind of breaking a lot of rules and trying our own stuff. And maybe that's one of the reasons that I feel like I meshed well with Final Cut 10, is that if there is a project that I am doing by myself, I will absolutely do it in 10. It is just such a great singular, it does enough. It does sound mixing well enough. It does color grading well enough. Sure, you can go to Resolve pretty easily, like, but it does all these things, and it does it in a very elegant way, that is sort of like, and there's all these great extensions. That's the thing I actually learned about on this project, was how many great plugins and extensions there are out there. And I was installing them left and right, figuring out what I could use to help cancel audio noise out from people's iPhone footage and this and that. But it's interesting that you're totally right. The traditional world has these set paths, and it feels like especially what was it? I think Apple was debuting the big Mac Pro, the new Mac Pro, and they were like, I forget. There was some specific ad wording about like, look, you can do 8K, 4 streams of 8K video or something crazy, and the people that I typically work with react to is like, you don't need that, because that's not helpful in the offline phase. And it does feel like, until we get to a point where there's no offline, there's always going to be multiple worlds, because offline and online, it is not necessarily a huge cost anymore. It's still a savings, because you're not paying for hard drives to store 8K footage for multiple editors working on the same thing. You can downres to 1080p and save a lot of money on storage. So it's like to me, the huge difference in those worlds is online and offline. I don't know.
I did a job for a client about 13, 14 years ago, and I was, they had brought me in, maybe it was more. They had brought me in to kind of figure out, it was their first Final Cut HD edit. It was very established post house in the Bay Area. They had a bunch of really old Avid systems on old like G3s and G4 Macs. And they'd bought a new cheese grater at the time. And so I went in for this corporate client of mine, a woman I'd cut many, many things for over the years. And I'm cutting away. And about 3 days into it, somebody comes in and they're looking at my time sheet, and she goes, which of these hours are offline? I went, what? She goes, well, what stuff is offline? I go, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm doing everything at full resolution. Everything I'm doing, I'm moving toward getting finished. It's 2005 or whatever. Like, what do you and she goes, oh no, it's a big difference. And I'm like, I don't know. Make up whatever you want. I'm just here to cut pictures. I can't deal with your accounting. And she was just like, and it's shocking to me in this day and age that we're still worried about that. Anyway.
Can I just say, before we go on to talk about the Princess Bride, which is kind of, I find fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And obviously we've got the different aspect ratios and all that going on. In my research, I had a quick look. Oh, you were cutting Ghostbusters, was that right, before the quarantine? And yeah. I watched the trail, and that looks really cool. It goes off. It's a, you know, you'd expect the music. I was expecting the music to come in on the trail, but it never did. But it's a bit more kind of like Stranger Things take on Ghostbusters.
No, yeah, we're actually still cutting it. We're still working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this movie. It's gonna be a blast. People, I think, are really like it. I don't want to say too much, but yeah.
Yeah, but the trailer's out there if you want to watch it.
Yeah, the trailer's out, and our release date got pushed back. Obviously, we're still working on visual effects, and we'll have to do scoring in the fall and whatnot. But yeah.
Okay, so Nate, help me out, because I'm not a big follower of, you know, Hollywood connections or whatnot. So you're working on Ghostbusters. COVID hits, everything slows down, and the Princess Bride idea comes up. Now, whose idea was it to do the Princess Bride?
That was Jason Reitman's.
And is Reitman working on Ghostbuster also, obviously?
Yeah, he wrote and directed Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Okay, again, apologize, I don't follow all that stuff. So everybody goes home. They're all bummed and sitting in their house and staring at the ceiling and, you know, watching the dust fall. And he comes up with this idea. Who did he contact first? Do you know?
I don't know if it was me or one of the other two producers, Erica Mills or Jason Blumenfeld. And but yeah, he's like, so what if this was a thing? And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And we shopped it around to a few different streaming platforms, basically saying the idea would be that we would do this thing and Jason would sort of direct all these different celebrities, and that the money would get donated first. That the money is not tied into the success of how many views it gets. It's not going to have tags popping up asking for people to donate. This is basically a streaming platform could have gone forward and said, we have donated X amount of dollars. Enjoy this show. Please come and watch our service. And that was Quibi. And Jason or Jeffrey Katzenberg is phenomenally generous. Donated $1 million, which translates to 100,000 meals for people in need, people infected by COVID. And then someone put it in perspective, like that's filling up the Staples Center 5 times. And that's how much food was generated. And that felt like, as soon as he said that, it was like, we're all doing this on, you know, on our own time. It's not like, not here to sit. We didn't negotiate like, what's the salary going to be? We just did it. And so it felt good to do something during this time that was both entertaining and for a good cause.
So not everybody's heard of Quibi, although I think we've talked about it in the past. How would you explain Quibi in a nutshell?
Quibi is a new mobile streaming service meant for mobile viewing, meaning that like they've patented the concept that there's a single piece of content that has both a vertical aspect ratio and a horizontal. So you can flip your phone and it's still the same show, but it's a different framing. And so many of their shows are framed with vertical in mind, but it also can be horizontal. You can stream to your TV if you want. I think they added that because of COVID, honestly, because everyone was at home all of a sudden.
Is there a sensor that tells me if I've rotated my TV on the wall?
No, it only does horizontal on the TV.
Okay. And so when it came out, I'm a sucker for checking out new stuff. I got to say, it was really spectacular to me because you'd watch it, and at first you're thinking, well, they're just taking a center cut, but then you rotate it and you're like, no, that's not what they're doing. They're reframing, and there's times where you perceive the story slightly differently if you're looking at one framing versus the other. And I actually had the idea of, you know, like a murder mystery where if you're horizontal, you see, you know, somebody's hand like this, but if you roll it to vertical, you realize, oh, they're reaching for the knife underneath the mattress or something like that. Like, I think there's a lot of fun stuff that you could do with Quibi.
So
100%.
So lockdown number 2, it's Murder on the Orient Express, the Quibi version.
But if you rotate it, it could look like a love story. I mean, I think that would be a really interesting way of producing a story. So, but you decided to do something different with the whole rotation trick. What did you guys do?
So, well, for like, usually you need like a very nice camera shooting in 4K and that your vertical cutout, even if you do, like you're saying, they don't just center cut. There's even a few shows I think where they've edited, if let's say there's 2 frames here, there's 2 people talking, and the horizontal is this whole frame, the vertical can do a cut here and then cut here. As long as the audio is the same, your cut points don't have to match.
Yeah. I saw one show where the vertical, I believe it was a different take because the camera had moved to bring the people into a closer proximity, whereas in the horizontal they were definitely standing further apart.
Oh, interesting. That's very fascinating.
I'm pretty sure I could have that wrong. I'm pretty good at making stuff up.
So does that literally mean you're doing 2 edits for a vertical and a horizontal delivery?
Basically. Now, like I said, the audio has to be the same so that it's not like changing audio or anything.
So it's the same audio track. You're going to deliver the same thing for the sound mix. So you might almost even do a horizontal cut first, and then you're going to deliver that, finish it, and then you're going to send that back, and then you're going to do the vertical cut for the vertical stream.
Yeah. I think
what did you do? Which one did you do first?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I think we did everything backwards. So,
first we made a radio show.
Exactly. Since one of the ideas that Quibi was, I'm not sure if it was Quibi pushing it or Jason pushing it, or maybe it was just organic. It was like this should be in vertical. And look, I'm one of those people. Anytime someone pops up on a video, I'm like, why didn't they shoot horizontal? Horizontal is the natural. Our eyes are horizontal.
I always say God put our eyes next to each other, not on top of each other.
I will say this, what the vertical does that's very good for this show in particular, is it makes you not think about what's behind actors, the props, the fact they're not there. It really focuses it on their face, their performance, and what they're doing. And that doing it in short 10-minute, less than 10-minute episodes makes it much more tolerable, and not just tolerable, but advantageous to the format. So what we did, everybody told everyone to shoot vertically. There's a few clips here and there that someone shot horizontally that we just punched in on. That was one of the reasons we asked them to shoot 4K, is that we did a lot of creative reframing, because these actors would sometimes shoot where they were down here, and then the other actor that shot is up here, and then having different, like, the eye trace was really difficult. So we would zoom in and reframe all over the place. And for the horizontal delivery, we'd have graphics that would show basically credit who's playing who, and have a still frame of the original saying, like, if you're ever confused, just turn your phone horizontal and it's like, oh no, this is Charlize Theron playing Fezzik, originated by Andre the Giant, and show you a frame of the original movie.
Yeah. So that's very interesting way of dealing with the horizontal. So you're shooting at 4K. The vertical deliverable is still 1080 by 1920.
Yes, that was
right.
That was
so
if you shot
so if you shot 1080, you'd have to scale stuff up a lot. So that's why you're shooting in 4K.
So if they shot horizontal.
All right, so this is like blowing my mind for a second, though, because now I'm thinking back. All right, you're going to go through the whole idea of production, right? So you might literally have, say you were just going to shoot this with iPhones, right? Because theoretically, these are mobile devices. So you might literally have a multi-camera rig where you have a horizontal iPhone shooting Filmic Pro locked in one setting, and you have one that's going vertical that's in another setting, and literally the DP is probably monitoring both sides of this. And you might have completely different framings based on where these are positioned with like lenses accordingly. But you also might do this from a completely, you might do this with like a red camera as well at a certain point. And
Absolutely.
It would have to be the same thing. And you might literally be shooting identical productions with completely inverted framing with totally different shots.
Potentially, but I think what most of the time they do is they'll shoot 4 or 6K and just reframe the same shot versus different cameras.
But then your blocking changes, though, doesn't it?
That's
On
what I think. They think
occasion.
they frame every shot with the idea that of what is this going to look like in vertical.
Wow. Then,
Even though
do you
change
find
later.
that sacrifices stuff on the horizontal then?
I don't know. I mean, I've not worked on the Quibi show that's not shot vertically on iPhones only.
So
but
yours,
there's definitely
because of what you did horizontal, you did not have a horizontal view. You always had your vertical view with, you know, behind the scenes commentary.
yeah.
Do you want to? Do you have it accessible? You could share your screen if you'd like.
Hold on, let me plug in this driver.
Can we just say hello to Steve, who's joined us?
Hi, Steve.
Hello,
Hi,
Mr.
everybody. Hi,
Bays.
Nathan. Nice to meet you. Hope everybody's doing okay today.
We're learning all about Quibi and Nate's edit that he did.
I have to say, you can call me really thick, but I didn't really realize that Quibi stood for quick bites.
I didn't
Oh,
either.
neither did I.
I didn't either.
I was thinking a bit of an odd name, and then I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it says, "Oh, it's quick. It's meant to be quick bites." And I go, oh, "Okay, that kind of makes sense." So, Nathan, can I ask? Was there a critical mass with the celebrities? Because you got some really good, you know, got Hugh Jackman. I'm just trying to think. Bryan Cranston. You know, was there a point where you had a few people who were in on it? You know, you got some people in, and then it was just a critical mass, and it spread, and then everybody joined in.
I mean, maybe a little bit to an extent. That once we had a few people, that it was much easier. Honestly, once we had Rob Reiner, and everyone's like, okay, so this is something that is done with the blessing of the director of the original film. This is very much.
Also, is this going to happen now with every movie from our childhood? And are you going to be editing all of them for us?
Let's hope so.
Yeah. What do you guys want to see next?
Probably
That's a good
Goonies.
question.
Right? We doing Goonies, or what are we doing? Like, what's Stand By Me? What?
It's weird. It's Princess Bride was such a perfect film because it's one of those films that like every scene is great. Like there's not like a half or like a section or like one standout character. It really is to me the whole movie. It's just I don't know. I think it's a great movie that everyone remembers collectively.
And did you kind of like say to the celebrities, we need to film it on your iPhone? But did they just use the standard camera, you know, go open video and hit the button and that was it?
We asked them to do 4K 24.
Right.
But
they weren't running Filmic Pro or anything like that. It was just the.
No, it was sort of like, I've joked that we should make our own app next time that forces the format. But
so here's a question: Who did the best job?
I can't answer that.
Oh, come on! Nobody's listening.
Okay, all right. I will say what's interesting, what surprised me, and maybe it's just because it's chapter 10 and it's very recent, but Bryan Cranston and Javier Bardem, Bryan, I don't know if he was wearing a lav or whatever, but they recorded separate audio and was the only actor who did. And so we had a separate audio files that they would, for every take, they would clap so that we could have a sync point. And they really thought it through and like really tried. And in chapter 10, he does these like soft, like evil kind of monologue stuff. And it's just like, you can hear it really well. And it's because they went above and beyond and recorded their own audio. And the fact that his daughter was like filming, was like, no, clap. And he's like, okay, hold on. This is really funny. So there's an example. This is an example of horizontal. I'm going to screen share. Is this going to work? Okay. So we have this little thing that pops up right in the beginning. And this would be our cold open type thing where we'd have like just this graphics, just presenting it horizontally. And this is Jack Black catching his own pose. And we had a full screen title, but mainly we would have like still frames of the original.
That's great.
So it just sort of helps you figure out who's who. And then Diego Luna is incredible. If there was ever like a real remake, Diego Luna would be great.
Now, was each actor allowed to pick the scene they wanted to do, or did Reitman?
We had a giant casting sheet. We had a giant Google spreadsheet of like broke out the entire movie. And so we had 86 different roles that we gave out to people. So it was just like just giant like sessions. We'd get on at Zoom at 9 a.m. and like being like, all right, who should play this? What do you think this? And then it was all about, do you know their agents and all this? And that stuff that's a little like I'm not familiar with, but it was interesting to listen to.
So I'm sorry for coming in a little bit late. I had another call with a group I'm working on a video as well. But what got me was the matching of the blocking, right? And so, I mean, it was so, I'm sorry if you discussed this already, but it seemed to be so well thought out, you know, it's like, and done by people that you weren't quite convinced could really pull it off technically, right? I mean, as you were saying, some are better than others, certainly. But it seemed to, I mean, and, you know, kudos to you for making it go together, but it just seemed to go so smoothly. It's like, did you actually block out every shot before they went and recorded it?
Jason had this process where he would sort of, I think, he would make all these different screenshots and basically be like, these are the shots you need to get. And they would send the sides. It was sort of like, here's your to-do list of stuff. Now, to be fair, we have a lot of flopped shots. There's a lot throughout the whole thing. It's like, oh, cool. Two actors film this facing the same direction. There's a few times where we're stuck in the blocking, and it's one of those things like you just force it. You just have to make it work, and it's okay. Like during the fight scene between Finn Wolfhard and Caitlin Deaver, it's one of my favorite scenes. It's so fun. There's a few points where they're facing the same direction, but you can't flip it because the whole point of the scene was I'm not left-handed, so you can't like actually, and they're holding a sword, so you can't suddenly switch the hands because that was the point of the scene. But it just works. And the vertical kind of helps with it. It just kind of, it makes you, with horizontal, if you flip between this cut that someone's over here and someone's like here, that's what it's designed for. Like vertical, it's not that bad when it's just this and this. It's not great, but it kind of works.
You might have noticed that we've lost Mr. Fenwick. He just sent me a thing saying his internet's died, so I'm sure he'll come back.
Yeah.
But so what was the process? You gave them the line, said, can you record it? And what happened after that? Because I would have thought trying to get everything back from the celebrities and organize would be, but organizing in some ways is the biggest hassle of editing.
It is, and that's why I was very lucky to have my assistant Nicholas Lundgren, who was also familiar with Final Cut 10. We set up, I don't know if you guys know Massive.io.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like a Spera level file transfer speeds at a ad hoc sort of pricing scale, and I was able to set up a portal which had its own URL, which was like homemoviepost.massive.com or something like that. And we would send that link to the actors, and it would be part of that email of here's all the screenshots, here's the lines, click this and upload, and you could upload directly from your phone. And the thing that we learned quickly is that I think back in the day, iMessage used to not compress, but since 4K and everything, it does now if it's longer than a certain amount of time. So we couldn't iMessage, we couldn't email, we couldn't reliably do anything. This is the only way we could get like full resolution stuff delivered. So they'd upload with their phones. You could select multiple clips at the same time. It would upload, and we'd get an email saying, here's some new clips available. And then Nicholas would both download it. He'd bring in Final Cut, make a new event. We'd use the auto name completion. We'd add a bunch of metadata and then rename everything what's it called? The apply custom name function. And then he'd send me an XML of the event. And then I would relink the files on my end. And that's how we stay in sync.
Right, and then you would just edit this scene by scene, an event per scene, and stitch the thing together.
Yeah, a lot of times I would cut the scene against the original movie if we only had half of it. It would sort of help structurally. So that was kind of fun. Sometimes you'd have like, you know, half a Miracle Max scene and it's Ari Grainer against Billy Crystal. And it was just like, that was weird to try to like, basically I would sometimes end up doing a vertical pass on the original movie for one scene just to make it work.
Right. And were you editing in a 9:16 timeline?
Yeah, 1080 by 1920.
Yeah.
At 24 frames per second.
Yeah. And then when you came to do the other version, you just obviously. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can't have a roll per aspect ratio, but you just copied everything, you know, made a compound clip or something, and copied it into another project and made the graphics up.
What's interesting is that I ended up flipping a lot back and forth for my little Aja T-Tap. It can't handle anything that's not 16 by 9.
Right.
Which I get. Why would it? Like, that's not on the feature list. It's not. So I would try to, you know, AV output. So I have a little stream box. We set it for Ghostbusters. And I was able to like sort of hijack and also stream to Jason this project. But I had to flip my timeline in Final Cut 10. And that was another thing early on I realized. I think Final Cut 10 was the only project that I possibly could have handled me changing the aspect ratio like daily on the same timeline. And things didn't get that screwed up. Maybe 1 out of 100 times.
Well, so you were modifying the project properties. I mean, I'm pretty sure, well, Steve will tell you, but I'm pretty sure you can't change the time base once you put a clip.
Not time based, but resolution.
Yeah, but you can actually do.
Yeah, you can change almost everything else, I think. Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
All right.
Pretty brave, actually, to take your beautiful finished piece and then switch it around.
I took a snapshot before every session, just in case.
All right, so I got to ask this question because I did the whole, like, it's a very specific system they have there where you get the dailies, it goes to the lab, it comes out, it comes into the system. Usually there's an Avid, and then you're going to split this out into a trailer with multiple people editing, and they're all going to work from that. And it's going to be a very clear pipeline where then you're going to go back and then you're going to get everything up-resed in the offline. Now we're living in a world where everyone is theoretically quarantined, working from various different places. Plus, you've got vertical and horizontal deliverables with multiple resolutions and deliverables that are going to stretch endlessly that also need to go cross between a DI and a sound house and VFX and turnovers for all of those things. Plus, you've got pull sheets from the VFX world. How are you guys managing this?
You're talking about Ghostbusters on that end?
Just generally, like on the Hollywood workflow, like how is this now adapting with what was already a complicated system into like fixing, like making that pipeline work again with like even additional deliverables and no clear path of like ever having people in the same place?
Everyone's been doing it differently. And I feel very lucky. The first on Ghostbusters is an amazing, smart guy, and he's figured out a way for us to have everything in sync. Even though we have some media is local, some of it's on the Nexus. A lot of other people are just screen sharing into the offices where they used to work, and that I couldn't stand. I don't know how anyone could do that. But to answer your question, I think no one's changed anything because there's the only thing is there's now a new layer on top of how do we use this system that was already there as of March and just like keep it going. And so it's everyone's choices of how to keep that going are all different. And that's either screen sharing or what we're doing, the hybrid streaming thing. We have, you know, me and Dana have local media. She's the other editor on Ghostbusters. And so we'll both stream.
So would you say, is this the time in history now where it's finally time to take a look at the fundamental system and how things get done?
I don't know. I know that sounds weird just since I'm such a huge proponent of Final Cut 10, but I don't think anything's too inherently broken with the other system. With this,
no, I'm just curious. Like, well, even with the VFX, like just the VFX side of this with the lab and all of that stuff and going back and forth and now figuring out how that disperses, like, It's just, I don't know, VFX pulls were always the thing where I'm like, this is the most inefficient thing I've ever seen. How is this going to continue?
They've really automated VFX pulls to the point where all you do is email a specific address and EDL,
Okay.
and a robot grabs the LTO tapes.
Wow.
And then pulls the EXRs and emails them to the vendor. And it's it's like an automated system now that it's like no human hands touched it. It's pretty great.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. The whole thing like fascinates me in terms of how you adapt this thing on a high level for a COVID world now versus, you know, what some possible other alternatives are. I mean, even if you were looking at a Premiere or Resolve system, is this even pragmatic or possible to do it this way?
I don't know. It's a good question.
What's interesting to me is that, you know, I think one of the major concerns about studios in working remotely has always been security, right? So with people taking encrypted drives and you know, getting nervous about who has access to what online, you know, could just download the whole film and, you know, whatever. But it sounds like in some ways it's more secure because if there are like fewer people in the process and there are fewer places for it to go wrong, right? Or to go into someone's, you know, thumb drive, for instance. I mean, if it's really all automated with the robots sending you what you need, you know, no one's in there at 2 a.m. doing something else and just happens to come across all that footage. So,
yeah, no, it's true. It's very true.
But you were using, I'm talking about collaborating, you were using 2 online review services, is that right?
Yeah, I love Kollaborate. I've worked with John Chappelle in the past, and I love using Kollaborate, and it's always really, really good quality. Frame.io is how Quibi handles everything internally, and I didn't want to bother Jason learning like a new service, so I kind of used both. And Frame.io came with working with Quibi, and I really liked Frame.io, especially its integration with Final Cut. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So if you could, yeah.
I was saying, does it do 9:16? I've never used it. Right.
But it also, Frame.io can do a turnstile asset, meaning you can take, if you upload the same thing and they have to be the exact same duration. If it's a Quibi show, you can like right click and say make turnstile, which means it just takes the two and it puts them so that on the Frame.io app on your phone, you can rotate and you get the feeling of what it's like going to be like in the Quibi show. And so to also answer your question earlier said about, I did stick to vertical, I did switch to do reviews. But when it came to finishing, I had a vertical master, 1080, 1920, and I would color grade using Sidecar actually to go to my iPad because the iPad's like a great display, and I figured this will work, and it worked surprisingly well. And then I gave that to Nicholas, and he would have that master as a vertical master. He would put into the horizontal graphics.
So if you could now that you like have gone through both sides of this process, like if you basically got a chance to go pick your team and build a modern production studio and do some of this stuff, how would you personally want it set up for you? What would your workflow and tools be? And that could either be in an Avid or Final Cut world. It kind of doesn't matter, but I'm curious, like having you lived in both worlds and now that we're in this sort of new world, how would you want to collaborate with people and do stuff with these new deliverables?
What kind of scale? What kind of show?
Let's say a smaller repeated series of webisodes.
Okay. I guess I would kind of do like this. I'd probably do a proper online where someone would go to Resolve and do that all in-house. And I would definitely choose Final Cut again for a show like this. I'm curious.
Did you do a Resolve turnover for this?
No, I just colored in Final Cut. I just didn't want to overproduce. That was actually one of our sort of at the very beginning, talking about it. It's like the only thing that we decided can't sound homemade or can't be homemade is the sound. Is that we needed a true sound mix and true dialogue cleanup to make things like because people don't want to hear like scratchy iPhone noise. but we didn't want to produce and like overcolor. There's a version of the Fire Swamp sequence that I colored very desaturated and dark, and trying to put an effect on it, and it's just not needed. It's fine to be perfectly normal, balanced, and like as if the iPhone captured it. I would just come in and try to make things match, make things a little bit more contrasty, a little bit, just give it a little love, give the actors the best look possible, since they're donating their time. But we didn't like do a full creative color grade. Otherwise I would have done something in Resolve.
And you found that just to be generally good enough?
Plenty good enough. Those the color boards on Final Cut 10 are oddly really, really nice. I know they were like instantly hated, I think, a long time ago, but they're actually pretty good.
Did you find yourself, so you used the color board and not even some of the wheels and curves and all that stuff? You weren't even messing with any of the other?
I don't, full disclosure,
Steve is
full
so mad at me
confession,
right now.
I do not know how to use the color curves. The curves do not work to me unless you're underneath the LUT. If you have a LUT protocol, wonderful. But to me, it's with the curves, it's just so easy to get in weird places that I'm like,
the
I don't
luminance curve is the one that really, really is effective for me. The other ones I'm kind of with you on, but the luminance to add contrast in the skin tone area, that's one that I tend to like. But other than that, I tend to agree.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
You need to keep it simple. I mean, for aesthetic reasons, but also just the technical ones, because it's iPhone footage, right? So it's already pretty highly compressed. You can't really do that much with it, other than, like you said, just like clean it up, make it look, match it as much as you can with the different shots, the different cameras. But I guess the consistency of the iPhone helped you there as well. Didn't have to do too much, and didn't have to worry about RAW or any of those extra complications. So, I mean, there was a simplicity to the color board, which is like, okay, you want more of this, you want less of that, we'll just go more or less. I mean, what else is there? And it was, it's the people who really love to get down deep into the weeds and mess with it. Those are the ones that disliked it the most, but everybody else was like, oh, I couldn't really get a good result before, but now I can kind of get it, and that was the win of the original color board. But
Totally agree.
All right. So what about media management for this? How did you guys wrangle the files?
Oh, this was my big mistake. So I'm used to just Final Cut working by myself. And I think that media managed libraries are fantastic. Copy everything inside the library. It's all in one file. You can archive it. Great, wonderful. Don't worry about anything. But as soon as I had an assistant on this, I probably should have changed course early on, but my head was only in the cut versus trying to figure out workflow. We should have linked to like a Dropbox or something. We should have like had libraries live out, or media live outside the library and be linked so that Nicholas could organize, sync, and I could just then link to the exact same files, and it may be different path, or maybe we somehow faked it so it was the same path. So we managed everything by just basically having our own separate libraries, and we'd add the actor's last name before footage. So, because we quickly ended up with multiple versions of, IMG_3499. Like we were like, oh shit, which one is which? And Final Cut would get confused. So we add like the person's name in front of it underscored. And so we would mimic the exact same process on this end. He was in Kansas City for a little bit. That was actually one benefit of this whole thing, is that he was able to go visit his family back in Kansas City, which has Google Fiber. And he was able to upload things to me. I was like, oh, I haven't had a chance to download all the new dailies today. He's like, don't worry about it. I have it uploaded in a library package, ready to go. Here you go. And he would upload gigabytes of footage, and just like that. It was, seeing him upload in Google Fiber is like, God, and I pay so much for the internet I get in here, and it's good internet, but it's not that good.
One thing you might have been able to do, because you could have shifted that midstream, actually, is you could have consolidated possibly outwards in the library and then sent him a library folder to relink to. There's a couple ways you possibly
can consolidate and point elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I haven't thought about that.
Basically, you push it out of the library to a shared folder, which is what I would always recommend on just shared storage in general. People keep things out, and You know, I mean, you can hold on to stuff as long as you're the only person that's working on it. That's cool, or you don't want anybody else to see it for some reason. But then the minute that they have to take over, it just consolidate out.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you can have it in the library and then just shift it out, and that could even go to a Dropbox where you could literally just copy and paste the library of whatever you've done. That person can open it on their machine, have it be the copy, and then they can relink to that shared media.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's actually really good to know.
We should have had this conversation a few months ago.
I know. I should have reached out.
This show is a good place for us to do some more training and some writing to get that knowledge about how best to work with distance and shared storage. I think it's changing really fast, and part of it is, you know, the speeds change the calculus too, because otherwise you never would have tried to do some of the things your assistant was doing, but now, you know, just like that you can, right? So now but you need to be flexible enough to change what in the past would have been a very like in stone workflow, and now it's more sort of like a stone in a river workflow, you know.
Yeah,
just stuff going on all around it.
Oh my gosh, true. Very true.
I mean, I think the situation with COVID's just propelled what we were doing kind of 2-3 years. You know, they've just taken that out. I mean, it's all just come up. If you look on all the forums, it's people saying, how do you work remotely? How can I share? How can I do all this? And I mean, I don't know about you, but I love editing in both places. I love editing in a big facilities house, and I love editing at home. And, you know, both have their positives and negatives. It's like editing at home. Sometimes you just go, you know, I say to my wife, you know, I'll be there in a while. I've just got to do this. It'll only take 10 minutes. And then you get to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, you've been in that time machine that just disappears.
Yep.
And then sometimes, you know, working in a facilities house, because you've got that interaction with people on a one-to-one, maybe not now with, you know, some of the jobs I'm doing in the future have got things we're talking about, perspex and in different rooms and all that stuff. But you get that collaboration between them, and you can talk to people about, you know, what happened or something like that. I mean, I did actually do one edit. It was really good. The client of mine worked out how to use a remote desktop. So I could either drive their machine, or what happened was that I just shared my, hello, Chris is back and outside. What happened, Chris?
The Comcast people a couple of blocks away decided, yeah, we're gonna unplug the internet for the neighborhood.
Chris, that's a great backdrop you've got. That's a great new backdrop.
It looks real.
Like that.
We were just talking about internet.
And the
This is
pitfall.
the table saw I'm gonna make your tall maker with.
There we go.
But what I was saying, yeah, they'd worked out using this service that you could do it either way. And then the latency on it was exactly the same latency as FaceTime. So you don't get anything doubled up. And so I had my laptop on FaceTime with the client, and then my iMac Pro, I shared the whole of the screen, and they get the audio as well, and they can do the keyboard and move the mouse should they want to.
Oh, wow.
And it was just perfect. And I did 3 days like that. And to the point of the client just said, we're never going to go back to having an office now. There's just no point. Why pay X thousands of pounds for an office that we're not in, and when we can do it all from home, and I don't have the commute. I can work in my underpants if, well, no, you don't want to know that. But
I'm not wearing any pants in my garage.
All right, okay. But I think, as I said, you know, going back to what I said, I think this with COVID is just transported us 3 years down the line to people working remotely. I'm not too sure it'll go back.
I agree with you, and I'm mourn for that. And I think there's definitely huge advantages to being at home. There's definitely, like, you know, huge cost savings on employers to not pay for an office. I feel lucky that we got through enough of Ghostbusters to the point where we were probably would have almost finished the movie with that version that we finished before COVID. It was very close, but we got there and we were in those offices, and I loved talking to the assistants, hanging out, collaborating. There's a lot of creativity and ideas that bounced around between people, like all just us chatting after work, you know, sharing a scotch. But like, and I'm kind of worried about the future of being in such silos that like, what's interesting to me is that when I started at Bad Robot, I felt like I was joining at a time where assistants were already, because of the digital revolution, no longer in the room. Where, you know, they used to hand the, you know, film splices and you know, you used to be there and you know, if they're like, hand me take 4, and you're like, well, actually take 3 might have been really good too. Like there's actually a huge amount of learning that I think a generation of assistants that I learned from, that's how they worked. And this is another nail in the coffin that assistants aren't going to have anything to do with.
I'm going to, let me disagree for a moment. And I think what, if you think about what the core of mankind's desire to share, right? You take 3 cavemen, you put them in a cave with some pigments, and you draw stuff on the wall. And we did that together because that was all the technology that we had available to us. And eventually we graduated from caves to celluloid and pigments on the wall to light, but we did it together. And you're right. I can imagine an assistant sitting in the cutting room, literally in the cutting room with the head editor. I bet there's a lot of like nonverbal stuff. Like, really, you want that take? Well, what do you think? You know, I get that. So if we can't sit next to each other, what we need to perfect, and I mean really perfect, is the ability to communicate remotely. You look great to me, Nate. I mean, I wish I heard you better. I will tell you that the audio quality of you using the mic on your computer, after a while, I don't want to listen to you anymore. Now, and that's a technological hurdle to overcome. I started doing remote edits about 15 years ago. And the first one I ever did was actually with Apple. And I was using it prior to, it was called iChat Theater, if you recall, in Final Cut 6 and 7.
Yep.
And I was doing it in, I want to say 4 or 5. And I was doing it with Apple, with a client of mine in Apple. And I said, hey, check this iChat feed. And it was, before iChat Theater, which was built into Final Cut Studio. And she was like, oh, how are you doing this? And I said, well, I'm using your software. Now, I had a bunch of hardware sitting on the table next to me to pull it off, but it worked. And I knew all along, I need to be able to see you. I need to see every nuance of your facial expression when you like something or don't like something. And then the audio thing has to be natural. It has to be casual. It has to be comfortable. And because there is a tolerance level that builds in us to the point where it's like, I got to be done with this call. But when that audio and video quality is better, we can get past that problem.
I'm going to disagree with that.
And then just work out the storytelling problem. Go, Sam.
I mean, I totally, this is not a permanent thing, because like we'll all just turn off our TVs at a certain point. This stops being worthwhile. You know, like this is the purpose of media was to like have a break, but the idea that you're just going to interact your entire life with people you never actually have in your real life, we're going to get tired of that fairly quickly. I'm already getting fairly tired of it. I enjoy my family a lot more than I enjoy a lot of these like screen discussions. In fact, I want less and less screens in my life. So the net result for me will be to turn off the screen.
That could be a different problem, Sam.
I'm just going to say I'm done with this and like move on. You know, I think having real world collaboration, we'll do this for as long as it sort of takes, but we will adapt back into some kind of hybrid existence where we have a lot of our interactions in the real world, and then we use the digital pipe for things that we want. But this idea of the digital pipe replacing humanity is just, I'm opting out. I'm going to opt out.
I wouldn't say, I hear you say replacing it. I'm not trying to replace humanity. I'm trying to broaden the touch of humanity without getting on a plane or in a car.
Well, and it's going to serve that purpose. I think that's what this really is. I think it's going to serve the purpose where I can connect to somebody, get what I need to get, and then get back into my real world and do that very effectively. And I think that's what's really being built. But I think this replacement of the physical world, which is where I think some people are seemingly interested in taking things, I think is going to be, well, maybe some people will be into that. I think many will just say, I don't want this.
It's a very good point. I think probably there's truth in both, to be honest. And I agree with you. Like, I think I'm gonna go out and buy a microphone now. But but I agree with you. There's a tolerance thing that builds up, and I'd be curious if you really did solve the video and the audio quality.
So I will tell you this, and this is a story I've told many times. I'll try and do it briefly. About 5 years ago, one of my no, I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was January 2017. One of my clients had foot surgery. She had a project she absolutely had to finish. She could not literally get to the office, and so she said, "Is there anything we can do?" And I said, "Well, there's this thing. It's called Zoom. Download it." She goes, "Well, my company won't allow me to install software on my computer." I said, "You have an iPad, right?" She says, "Yeah." I said, "Put it on your personal iPad." So she's at home with her foot elevated, surgery, messiness, whatever. She's got a corporate laptop, which is very locked down and corporate. And next to it, she's propped up her iPad. And I used the Zoom screen share, which at the time was higher quality than it is today, because Zoom went from having 20 million users to 200 or 10 million users to 200 million users in the span of one pandemic. And she sat there and she's like, I said, "Can you hear me okay?" She goes, "I can hear you fine." "Can you hear the timeline okay?" She goes, "I can hear it fine." "I can see it fine." 10 minutes into our session that day, she says, "By the way, this is wonderful, and I will never set foot in your office again."
Yep.
She was done. She goes, "I never need to do anything different. This is perfect."
And actually, she could have been being really polite.
That's actually might be better for the editors. I think what it may come down to is there's certain interactions that we are fine with just being impersonal or quick and efficient versus some that we actually want to enjoy, and I think there's different aspects of this. And I think being able to have clients around the world that you can just interact with and get the interchange done with versus the amount of time lost in transit and all of these other things, I think that is the thing that like we're going to be able to solve here. And then there's other ones that are like, no, I actually really enjoyed having people that I'm around with when I work with during the day and I can interact with. And that's, I think, the stuff that we're going to find to be irreplaceable.
You're totally right. And Chris, you may bring up a great point because Jason had a similar reaction. It took us about a month to figure out all right, we need local media and we're going to stream, and then we'll do like a Zoom for our talking. And he loved it. He's like, "I never need to go to the office again." And I'm kind of hoping he was joking because I couldn't imagine going through a director's cut specifically. All those deep brainstorming sessions about like, what is this going to be? Those early weeks of an edit are so critical to me. I would get a lot of Zoom fatigue if we tried to do over that, but I could totally see that there's tons and tons of directors and producers out there that are now like, never again, because it's right.
And I'm just saying that the Zoom fatigue is a thing, but there are ways to battle it. There are ways to overcome it, and audio and video quality matter. They really, really does. And I'll say, I have a group of guys I hang out with in the evenings, like somewhere around 5:30, 6 o'clock, somebody will like start a Zoom room. And it's been, I hate to say it because it sounds so horribly nerdy, but I like hanging out with these guys. And we're just in a stupid Zoom room, and we laugh.
You've also come along on my drinking nights on Zoom.
Yeah, it's not bad. I enjoy. I only when I'm invited, and I got to say, Peter, you don't invite me very often.
Okay,
I'm a little worried about that.
All right, next one I'll shoot you an invite. For me, ideal for remote working would be a complete handoff So it would be, I could go to a facility, sit down, talk to people, really nice, monitor everything, and do something. But then if I need to finesse something and it's going to take me a day, I'd just like to be able to go home and power everything up, and it would be there, and I could just work, and just go, well, maybe I need to go to the office today, or I can do this all from home, or something like that. I mean, I think it does make a difference if you've got projects where people are adding material all the time, and that's where a colleague of mine, we found the problem is that every couple of days there was material added into the project, and it was really hard to keep everything syncing. I mean, I know this is, should be using PostLab or something like that, but it just got a bit tricky to the point of we ended just cloning the drive every time we wanted to go home, and we just cloned the drive and then took it and then powered the thing back up.
I'll give you another for instance, Nate. I do a little bit of live production still. That used to be the staple of my career, but I did a live show last month, and because of COVID, the studio where we do it, typically there's 3 or 4 people working in one small control room, and literally, like, I'm directing and switching the show, but shoulder to shoulder with the audio guy on a little mixer, and then so they were like, yeah, that can't happen. We're not going to do that, COVID. So we what we did is we took apart their control room, and we put the audio setup in the middle of their studio, and then they took the remote control for the switcher head and a multi-display, and they walked it down the hall to an edit suite, and they put me in the edit suite. They put the audio guy in the studio, and then the EIC stayed in the control room. And I did directing the show. I didn't like not being able to look at my audio guy and go, hey, you ready? And have him just be able to nod to me. So we actually set up a little 3-way Zoom on our laptops just so we could watch each other, even though we're in different rooms. And it's learning the importance of this part of communication. And when we embrace that, we can get better at it. I'm not saying I want to replace humanity, but I don't want to travel unless I have to. I want to travel because I want to.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense.
I
agree with you about the eyesight thing. I actually have so I have like one big 4K monitor. That's basically where it cut. My laptop right here for Zoom, and I have my TV with my Azure output. So I'm able to sort of zoom and then have the TV right behind it, so I can see Jason's reactions to things, and I'm not having to like do this.
Yeah. What do you think of that over there?
Exactly.
Going back to Final Cut, Nate, did you get any eyebrows raised when you said you were doing it on Final Cut Pro 10? Or was it a case of no, you made your choice, you want to edit it, it's up to, it's not a money thing, we just need to finish it. It doesn't really matter what you edit on.
I guess it was sort of like there was some assumptions from Quibi. They're like, so are you Premiere or Avid? And I was like, actually. But it was, I guess, if the eyebrows are raised, they were not within the email communique that I received. So it was maybe like, I knew it was like a thing. I was like, I'm gonna do this, and they're like, Quibi gave us a long leash because of like, normally they want like a 4K master for like longevity, and we're like, we're not gonna be able to do that. Like that's a lot of these delivery specs that we're just like not gonna be able to hit. But yeah, so they were fine with it.
Did you find any time during the process where they were like, just assume that you would do something the way an Avid would do it, but Final Cut was different or better or worse? I mean, did they remark at any point that they noticed a difference?
No, honestly, it was after the beginning, after sort of the green lighting, and we did some bunch of tests. We shot ourselves with vertical and did some like basically the first episode we had a version that was no celebrities, just like me and my wife, Jason, his daughter, like all that stuff. And honestly, the only thing that I think I kept like Jason was really impressed with, and the producers were really impressed with, was just how fast we'd get footage in, and I'd have a version ready. And they were like, wait, what? And I was like, this is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm doing it. Like, it was just sort of like for me, it was the game changer, because I'm not relying on IMA. I'm not transcoding to DNX. I'm throwing it in there. I can quickly look at the thumbnails, look at just how fast everything is to do. It's amazing how even little things.
Was Jason a part of any of that? Were you sharing your user interface so he could see any of that, or?
No, the stream box that we have only does the output, so it doesn't do the interface. I think every once in a while he would see it, but yeah, I don't know, not that much. But he knew I was doing it in Final Cut, and he kind of just trusted me, which was nice of him.
So I apologize if you covered some of this when I was on my digital banishment, but I would assume what I would do, thinking about your final deliverable, is I would cut the vertical in a compound clip, and then I would drop that into the horizontal, and then do all the graphic work there. Now, did you do the graphic work, or did you guys have people that you worked with to do that?
We had a graphics company, Smith and Lee, who were great people who did all the graphics. They would deliver it to my assistant. Would have been a great idea if there was any advantage to doing, like, where I would need to break things out. But the truth is, my vertical cut became the vertical cut as our master, no matter where it was. So I ended up just sending a ProRes file to Nicholas for him to drop into a horizontal timeline. I could see us doing it in the future. There is, like, to me, we had to just do this so run and gun. I mean, if we have more time, if we did another one, there's a version of, like, well, maybe you have 2 vertical videos next to each other, and you want to be more experimental with how we can use the horizontal to show multiple things happening at the same time. And that way I would start doing some of those things. But yeah.
Okay, you're dropping in and out, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading the text message that you sent me to say we should wrap up in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have to.
One little screen that's this big.
Yeah.
I have a VFX review in about 5 minutes.
So Nate, what you're saying is you did the vertical cut, and then the graphics house did all the graphics, and then you just composited the 2 together?
Yeah, and Nicholas would have to cut it so that it matched the timing, so that we wanted the graphics to always feel like a response. So if you were watching the vertical and you're like, who is that? You know, so it's like he would have to try to time things out of when actors' names landed where.
Wow, that seems so much harder than what I would have done.
Well, the good thing is that the graphics were like 15 seconds long, and they were just like still mostly, except the still frame was slowly pushing in. And so he would just do a cross dissolve between graphics and dissolve them either earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What a fun project, though. It
was a blast.
Was it? What are the chances? I'm answering my own question in my head. What are the chances this would have happened without COVID?
0.
Yeah.
0.
I think that by and large, most of us, a lot of people that I talk to, are starting to see there's little moments where we're like, I hate that the world is stuck in their house, and yet there's some good that has come from this. You know, it's pushed people technologically. It's in some places it's pushed people creatively. There's going to be a whole lot of little kids that remember the summer of 2020 as the summer that mom and dad stayed home with me all summer, you know?
Yeah.
And we got to go on hikes, and we got to spend more time, you know, make pillow forts or whatever it is. And I think that as we all get frustrated with everything, I think we need to kind of see those little moments and like put them on a pedestal and give them the recognition that they deserve, because I think it's those little human triumphs that get us through all this crap. And it's not easy, and nobody wants to do it again, but let's at least, you know, celebrate the things that worked out okay. Right?
I could not agree more. And you're totally right. That it's the human it's this the cheesy lack of sounding too cheesy. It's the human spirit that is sort of embodied in what we do in times.
You know
like
what?
this.
We're in a pandemic. I don't mind being a little cheesy.
There we go. So yeah, no, I totally agree that this was to me a very creative, beautiful, and had a great cause behind it. And it was without COVID. You get to see a little bit into these celebrities' lives a little bit, and the fact that they were so willing to give. And I mentioned, and I hope I really iterated that they really gave it. Like they really went for it, and they were like, "No, this is a scene." And that's the thing, we wanted a place for them for entertainers to entertain, and it be for a good cause, and because that's what they do best. It's not a video of a celebrity being like, "Everything's gonna be fine" from their hot tubs. It's just like let entertainers entertain. Because that's what we've been doing for hundreds of millions of years.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming and sharing your whole story. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course.
And
Thank you for having me.
If I was sitting at my computer in the other room with actual internet, I'd be showing some graphics. I'd be thanking Other World Computing. I'd be thanking Industrial Revolution.
You need some wooden standbys in your garage.
There we go. I do love Other World Computing.
Some wooden graphics. Just hold up wooden graphics.
Yeah. It's be the new style.
There's a homemade. That's the home movie version.